Alright, picking up where we left off, this is part 4 of chapter 7, learning. Now we're going to talk about flaws in memory. Forgetting is an inability to remember. The ability to forget is as important as the ability to remember. What would life be like if you could not forget? Normal forgetting helps us remember and use important information. We remember the forest rather than the individual trees. In Ebbinghaus's methods of savings model provided compelling evidence that forgetting occurs rapidly over the first few days but then levels off. This savings is the difference in learning something between the first and a second time. All right, now we're going to talk about memory decay. Proactive interference is interference that occurs when prior information inhibits the ability to remember new information. Retroactive interference is interference that occurs when new information inhibits the ability to remember old information. All right, another flaw in memory is called blocking. This is the temporary inability to remember something. This is like that time when you're like, it's just on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it. That is an example of blocking. Blocking often occurs because of interference from words that are similar in some way, such as in sound or meaning, that recur. It's like when I try to remember, what some actor's name is, and I'm so close to it, but I come up with some name that kind of sounds like it. That would be an example of that. Another flaw is absent-mindedness. This is the inattentive or shallow encoding of events. During most of our daily activities, we are consciously aware of only a small portion of both our thoughts and our behaviors. This creates absent-mindedness. It's as if we're on autopilot and not really paying attention to what's going on around us. All right, and a flaw in memory that you've likely heard about is called amnesia. This is a deficit in long-term memory that results from disease, brain injury, or psychological trauma, in which the individual loses the ability to retrieve vast quantities of information. There are two types of amnesia. The first is retrograde amnesia. This is a condition in which people lose past memories, such as memories for events, facts, people, or even personal information. This is the typical type of amnesia that you've probably heard of. The person can't remember something from the past. But there's a different opposite type of amnesia, and it's called anterograde amnesia. This is a condition in which people lose the ability to form new memories. The case of H.M., he had the classic case of anterograde amnesia. He could remember old information, but after his surgery he lost the ability to form new memories. Another flaw in memory is called persistence. This is the continual recurrence of unwanted memories. This plays a large role in PTSD. This is a serious mental health problem with an estimated prevalence of 7% in the United States. The most common triggers of PTSD include events that threaten people or those close to them. Emotional events are associated with amygdala activity, which might underlie the persistence of certain memories. Persistence can be reduced. Contemporary researchers are investigating methods to erase unwanted memories. There's a drug named propranolol, and this blocks postsynaptic receptors for norepinephrine. If given directly after a traumatic event, it lessens the impact. There's also a chemical called HDAC, and although these methods have not been used yet with humans, HDAC inhibition shows promise in the treatment of enduring trauma. People tend to recall their past beliefs and past attitudes as being consistent with their current ones. This happens through memory bias. This is the changing of memories over time so that they become consistent with current beliefs or attitudes. A group's collective memories can seriously distort the past. All right, now we're going to talk about a phenomenon called flashbulb memories. These are vivid, episodic memories for circumstances in which people first learned of a surprising, inconsequential, or emotionally arousing event. This would involve events like 9/11. Flashbulb memories can also be biased and inaccurate. For example, studies of the 9/11 attacks and the Boston Marathon bombings demonstrate diminished recall several years later. All right, any event that produces a strong emotional response is likely to produce a vivid, although not necessarily accurate memory. This is called the von Restorff effect. This is a distinctive event might be recalled more easily than a trivial event, however inaccurate the result. People make source misattributions. A source misattribution is a memory distortion that occurs when people misremember the time, place, person, or circumstances involved with a memory. There is a sleeper effect. An argument initially is not very persuasive because it comes from a questionable source, but becomes more persuasive over time when repeated. There's also the false fame effect. This is an effect that causes people to mistakenly believe that someone is famous simply because they have encountered the person's name before. It's the same false fame effect as we just discussed earlier. Another type of amnesia is called source amnesia. This is a type of misattribution that occurs when a person has a memory for an event but cannot remember where he or she encountered the information. Childhood amnesia is the absence of early episodic memories and may be due to the early lack of linguistic capacity as well as the immature frontal lobes. Another type of amnesia is called cryptomnesia. This is a type of misattribution that occurs when a person thinks he or she has come up with a new idea, yet has only retrieved the stored idea and failed to attribute the idea to its proper source. This mistake can later lend to an accusation of plagiarism. This one happens to me all the time. I am a musician, and sometimes I think of something that I want to go work out on the keyboard and on the computer, and then I go do it. And then later I realized that it was just a part of some other song I'd heard that week that I thought was really neat. But I thought I came up with the idea, even though I had not. Suggestibility can bias memory. Loftus's study on suggestibility concluded that people can remember seeing non-existent objects. In this study, one group saw a car at a stop sign in an image. Another group saw a car at a yield sign. Researchers then asked if another car passed the car at the stop sign to both groups. The yield group said they saw the car at the stop sign because of the tricky question. That's how suggestibility works. It's kind of innocent at first. One group saw a car at a stop sign. The other group saw a car at a yield sign. But they asked a very specific question. If another car passed the car at the stop sign, suggesting that there was a stop sign and not a yield sign, so the group that saw the yield sign said they saw a stop sign, even though they had not. Different wordings of questions altered the participants' memory of the event. Suggestibility is the development of a biased memory from misleading information. Eyewitness testimony might inadvertently develop stronger memories for inaccurate details due to reconsolidation, for example, retelling their stories to the police, their friends, and relatives. Memories can be distorted or even implanted by false information. Imagining an event might lead to confusion of the mental image and the real memory. Children are particularly susceptible to false memories being induced. There is a lost in the mall effect. Family members can implant a lost in the mall memory, and children will then have that memory. It's because the child imagined the event and then assumed that was the actual memory. The legitimacy of repressed memories continues to be debated by contemporary psychologists, many of whom argue that such memories may be implanted by suggestive techniques, for example, hypnosis and guided recall. While research shows that some therapeutic techniques seem especially likely to foster false memories, it would be a mistake to dismiss all adult reports of early abuse. All right, we talked about an eyewitness effect earlier. How accurate are eyewitnesses? Well, sometimes evidence can be ignored, and this is something called confirmation bias. Confirmation biases might even affect what potential eyewitnesses notice in the world around them in the first place. In the criminal justice system, one of the most powerful forms of evidence is the eyewitness account. Some psychologists and their colleagues studied 40 cases in which DNA evidence indicated that a person had been falsely accused or falsely convicted of a crime. They found that in 36 of these cases, the person had been misidentified by at least one eyewitness. All right, eyewitness accounts can be unreliable. There's a picture of two fellas here. Yeah, at a distance they might look similar in a couple different ways. The top image is of a William Jackson. He served 5 years in prison because he was wrongly convicted of a crime based on the testimony of 2 eyewitnesses. Note the similarities and differences between Jackson and the man on the bottom. Well, the man on the bottom was the real perpetrator. That's how eyewitness testimony can work. It's not always true. And that concludes our lecture for Chapter 7. Learning.